So this makes me sad. So Pharrell has a documentary coming out on his life. It's a Lego movie. So that's quite interesting. And he was been interviewed by the Hollywood Reporter, and they asked about his former Neptunes partner, Chad Hugo. And he said, "Are you guys on speaking terms now?" And Pharrell said, "No, but I love him. And I always wish him the absolute best. And I'm very grateful for our time together." So what happened was earlier this year, Pharrell filed the trademark for the name the Neptunes. So you figure, oh, okay, that's curious because they don't really produce under the Neptunes anymore. But okay, and I guess Pharrell said, well, he was just trying to protect the name before somebody else gets it or something like that. So okay, that's fine. The problem is that he was trying to keep the name for himself. You would think that it would be Chad Hugo and Pharrell Williams file for the trademark of the Neptunes name, but it's just Pharrell Williams. And that's wrong. The Neptunes is Chad and Pharrell. It's the media who kept on putting Pharrell out there like he was the sole producer of the Neptunes. And after a while, I don't think it was a problem, but as the years go along, people say, oh yeah, the Neptunes is Pharrell Williams. It's like, no, it's Chad and Pharrell. Pharrell's production on his own has been fine. Like he's had Blurred Lines, he's had Happy, he's had like Feds Watching with 2 Chainz. But if you listen to the Neptunes production, they did different things musically. They did different chords. Like there's a distinct difference with a Pharrell Williams production versus Pharrell and Chad Hugo. And this lawsuit saddens me because these guys, they known each other since they were kids. They known each other. They were band together. They were nerds together. Like when I see partnerships, like I always said this about Will Smith, right? Will Smith could have dropped Jazzy Jeff when he became the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but he brought Jeff on the show. And the only reason Jeff was on the show more is because Jeff was like, I'm not an actor. Because they wanted him more on the show. But Will didn't have to bring Jeff along, but he did. And even after Will became Big Willie, movie star, he's still doing stuff with Jeff. Him and Jeff never fell apart. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis met in Outward Bound in Minneapolis as teens. They were in different bands together. Then it became Flight Time. And then they joined The Time with Morris Day. And then they became a production team under the name Flight Time. And they said they never had a signed contract, just a handshake deal. Now, I would not suggest that to most people because you can't trust most folks. But Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis never had a signed contract because they trusted each other. And if I look at 2004, Chad and Pharrell, these two guys, I would never thought that I thought they were same just like Jimmy and Terry. It's like these dudes are brothers. I can never imagine them being in court. So what happens? So Pharrell signed that trademark, and then Chad countersued, and it's so sad because I'm sure because Chad when they were the Neptunes, Chad had got married. So you have to think like Pharrell's probably the godfather to Chad's kids, or that he's Uncle Pharrell to the kids. I always ask, like, when people do these things, when they go to court and file for trademarks or like branding and all this stuff get in the way, it's like, man, is it worth losing a friendship over? It's one thing if you're just working with someone, but this is a guy that you went to school with. You guys had dreams together. Like you guys, when Teddy Riley moved from New York to Virginia in the early 90s, Chad and Pharrell bugged Teddy every day to work with him. And that's how they got on that Rump Shakers remix. They still didn't reach their success first until they had N.E.R.D with what back in the late, like around 97. But they did this stuff together. They had dreams together. They basically were a couple. And I know couples kind of come apart, but they shared so much success. Like, why filing for a law? Why for filing for the name for the Neptunes? Why should that break you guys up? It doesn't make any sense. But speaking about them, now I think I need to speak on like the impact of the Neptunes. Like if you go back to the 2000s, it wasn't just them. Like it was the Neptunes, it was Missy and Timbaland, even though they were starting to do separate stuff. Just Blaze, Scott Storch, Kanye West, Dr. Dre, Swizz Beatz, Jay Dilla. Man, I know I'm forgetting the other folks, but it was a murderer's row of producers back then. If you were a rapper and you had access to any of these dudes back then, if you didn't make it, it just wasn't in the cards. Because that was a murderer's row of producers. And from a culture standpoint, because they said like Chad and Pharrell used to say, how they were in band and all this stuff and how much, they had Star Trek Entertainment, the Clones, N.E.R.D. Like these guys are outwardly saying like, no man, we're nerds. That's who we are. Kanye West and the Neptunes were so important for people like me. Kanye made it cool, like, hey, you can wear a pink shirt. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, who was wearing backpacks? There's very few dudes that was wearing backpacks like Kanye's. That whole backpack culture. Backpacks are commonplace today on adults, but not back then. It was a different time, man. You know, even with the Neptunes, so they had the Neptunes and they had the Clones album, but then they did N.E.R.D. N.E.R.D. was a rock hybrid pop funk R&B band, man. And this year I came across a track that either I forgot about or I just didn't know. So a guy who was influenced by them, Donald Glover, he dropped Mr. and Mrs. Smith earlier, like in January. So then I was watching interviews with Maya Erskine and Donald Glover, which sent me down the rabbit hole of Childish Gambino, and they suggested this Neptunes song, Sooner or Later. And I was like, I don't remember this song. It's from 2008. That's one of the best songs of that decade. It's set, the videos at the stock market is a stock market crash, and it's the ending because the song sounds like a Beatles track. It's like, oh, it sounds like John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And then it just ends because Pharrell says, it's over, leave it. And then the guitar just comes in. You got drums just going crazy, confetti flying, guys just wailing on the guitar like this. It's like, oh my God, this is the best song ever. Because I am a student of Jimi Hendrix and Prince and Ronald Isley and Eddie Van Halen and Kurt Cobain, Eric Clapton, and rock drummers like Dave Grohl and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. And I got this black dude and this Asian guy and a black dude on guitar and a black dude on drums just killing it. I love that song. Every time I go to Sooner or Later, I can't get enough of that song. I was like, oh man, I haven't heard this in a song. It's like, then I'm going like this. Yes! Yes! They were so good just for culture and for music. Like the only two Jay-Z songs that I stop to listen to all the time is PSA, which I think Just Blaze did that, but Excuse Me Miss. Excuse Me Miss is probably one of Jay's best songs ever. The video is great, but the song, that Neptune song on that is great. Like Robin Thicke, like my favorite up-tempo Robin Thicke song is Blurred Lines. I like Blurred Lines a lot, but it's not my favorite. My favorite is Wanna Love You Girl that the Neptunes did with him. Because Blurred Lines was produced by Pharrell, and it's great. But Wanna Love You Girl, the chord changes, the beat changes, Robin's vocals was good on Blurred Lines, but it's better because he's hitting that falsetto. Wanna love you, girl, wanna love you. The Hype Williams video production of it. To me, that's the strongest song. But it just shows you, if you want to hear a great, what the Neptunes really were, listen to I Wanna Love You Girl by Robin Thicke. Because it has been played. People don't play that song that much, but it's so good. They were just so good for everything. Skateboard culture. Pharrell did skateboards. Lupe Fiasco was doing skateboards. Lil Wayne was doing skateboards. It was just so much that appealed to a guy like me. Because I wasn't a dude selling drugs on the block. I didn't hang out with people. I wasn't a cool dude in school. Like I like watching Star Trek and reading X-Men comic books before comic movies became cool. These guys were important to people like me. You don't have that today. Everybody's either twerking or they're a player or a thug. And everybody's not like that. That 2000 period was so good because you could be thuggish, but you also could be a nerd. We wouldn't have Tyler, the Creator, without these guys. We wouldn't have Childish Gambino without these guys. So I wish Chad and Pharrell, especially Pharrell, give the lawyers, meet with Chad in the studio and hash this thing out. And maybe make more music together. Will they be the same as they were back in the 2000s? No. But for their friendship and the families that know them both, I think it's important for Pharrell to drop this lawsuit. Do a 50-50 split on Neptune's name. Because what's more important for the rest of your life? The few dollars you're going to make off that name, or a 30-year friendship that you lost for no reason?